On Friday, the Canadian government announced that it is now requiring YouTubers, podcasters, live streamers to register with the government. 99% of Canada's mainstream media just shrugged. They already work for the government in a way because they're either working directly for the government with the CBC or they're on government subsidies. But other countries' journalists were shocked. But then I saw my friend Billboard Chris and his comment. He said this on Twitter: "If we don't have freedom of speech in Canada, why am I not in prison? Why am I free to say whatever I want, whenever I want, wherever I want, in defiance of what our government wants?" Now, I like Chris a lot. I hope he's not tempting fate with that tweet. Here's what Chris is famous for and why he has the nickname Billboard Chris.
There are two sexes, there are zero genders, and there are infinite personalities.
Okay.
That sums up everybody.
Sure.
This whole concept of gender identity didn't even exist until the 60s, and it should be abolished entirely. Because all it is personality, and all it is, the entirety of gender ideology is based on stereotypes. If a girl is more masculine, maybe she's trans. Nonsense. There's no right way to be a girl or boy. Tomboys are not actual boys.
All trans people are saying is there's no one way to be one or the other, or if you don't identify as other, that's cool too. Also, like, gender as we know it is a modern invention. Like, other cultures before being colonized have their own understandings of gender. Also, there are people who are neither man or woman. You know,
no, there's not.
Some cultures have their own term.
That's not true.
It is true. Look at different indigenous tribes here.
Not true.
Okay, you can look it up. Just how I looked up.
I've looked it all up. I've had 20,000 of these conversations. Okay. Well, yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because historically, gender dysphoria, which is this condition where they don't feel comfortable with their sex.
Yes.
It's essentially self-loathing, is what it is. Historically, this affected mostly boys. Most of them grew out of it when they went through puberty, more than 80%.
Okay.
But a majority actually grew up to be gay.
Okay.
Which makes a bit of sense when you think about it.
Yeah, I know.
Effeminate little boys.
Totally, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So this whole movement today, these little kids who would grow up to be gay are now coming to believe, oh, I must be trans because I'm a really effeminate little boy.
Trans kids matter! Trans kids matter! Trans kids matter! Trans kids matter!
Okay, I wasn't
Chris is actually really polite, and he's very careful with his choice of words. He also does a lot of his work in the United States where they have the First Amendment, but is he right about the law here in Canada? Is he really free? Well, so far, I guess, but I've been in the free speech trenches for a while now, ever since I published the Danish cartoons of Mohammed back in 2006, and I was prosecuted for 3 years by the Alberta Human Rights Commission. And I'm sorry to say, what Chris does would absolutely be illegal in more and more places in the country. For example, if he had those billboards within 100 meters of a drag queen story hour in Calgary, he'd be arrested, even if he didn't say a word. I know this because Pastor Derek Reimer was arrested and charged by police for doing just that. So I thought maybe I should recap the censorship that's going on in Canada today, not just for Chris, but for everyone to know, and even for people outside Canada to know. Some of these examples I'm going to give you are bigger than others. Some are more subtle, some are more serious, but they are all real. And the trend is getting worse. Here are 30 ways that Canadians are censored. But don't lose hope, because at the end of the 30-item list, I'm going to tell you one way to fight back. All right, let's get to it. I got 30 to go through. First example, the CRTC registration of podcasters. That was the news on Friday. Canada now joins North Korea, China, and Iran in requiring podcasting companies to register with the government. It's like communist Romania when you had to register your typewriter with the police. After all, it was a dangerous weapon. Second example, police allow Antifa to attack conservatives on the street. Chris himself was assaulted on the streets, and police routinely refused to arrest the perpetrators.
You suck. Fuck you. Fuck you. You're not wanted. Fuck you. You're a fucking idiot. You're a fucking.
I don't know what to say. I guess these police officers are mostly indoctrinated as well.
Everyone here.
They're afraid of the mob.
Because you're a fucking idiot.
I think they're afraid that if they do anything to actually keep law and order, that they'll end up being on the end of this verbal abuse. So it's just cowardice from everybody all around.
People probably want to know, how do you keep your composure?
Fuck you!
What's that?
How do you keep your composure?
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you!
Nothing.
Fuck you! 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 Hey! Get your fucking ass up there! You
This happens all the time. Police are instructed not to arrest Antifa or other left-wing protesters when they're attacking conservatives. In a way, it's left-wing politicians delegating, contracting out their censorship to their left-wing street gangs. Here's Antifa attacking our reporter Alexa Lavoie about 10 days ago while police did nothing but look.
S'il vous plaît, les gars. Ouais, non, ils sont là, ils sont en train de filmer. Tu vois là, c'est ça ce qu'on est en train de dire là. Ils sont en train de nous attaquer, puis il n'y a personne qui réagit.
It's a form of censorship, isn't it? Example 3, government venues like city-owned convention centers ban or cancel events that politicians don't like. Here's an example. It routinely happens to peaceful activists like Megan Murphy, a feminist who wants to talk about women's rights in the age of transgenderism. She's been banned from government facilities. Example 4, Billboard Chris is polite and very media savvy, but others who are a bit less eloquent end up prosecuted for years, even decades, and some are even jailed. 7 years ago, Bill Whatcott peacefully joined a gay pride parade in a costume and handed out pamphlets criticizing gay sex. He was arrested and charged with a crime and has been in court ever since. Here's another example. Eric Brazeau peacefully did the same thing, but about radical Islam. Same thing, pamphlets. He was sentenced to 9 months in prison. Example 5. I mentioned human rights commissions. That's one of the many censorship weapons. Here's what it looked like to be interrogated. This is me during a 3-year investigation and prosecution for when I published those harmless Danish cartoons back in 2006. Here's my interrogation in 2008. Remember this?
My name is Ezra Levant. Before this government interrogation begins, I will make a statement. When the Western Standard magazine printed the Danish cartoons of Mohammed 2 years ago, I was the publisher. It was the proudest moment of my public life. I would do it again today. In fact, I did do it again today. Though the Western Standard, sadly, no longer publishes a print edition, I posted the cartoons this morning on my website, EzraLevant.com. I'm here at this interrogation under protest. It is my position that the government has no legal or moral authority to interrogate me or anyone else for publishing these words and pictures. That is a violation of my ancient and inalienable freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and in this case, religious freedom and the separation of mosque and state. It is especially perverted that a bureaucracy calling itself the Alberta Human Rights Commission would be the government agency violating my human rights. So I will now call those bureaucrats the Commission, or the HRC, since to call the Commission a Human Rights Commission is to destroy the meaning of those words.
Boy, it's been a long time, eh? The battle's actually a lot worse now. Example 6. One of the reasons my friend Chris hasn't been canceled is that he literally stands on the street. If he tried to book a venue, even if he managed to get a private venue where he knew the owner, a mob threatening violence would force the venue to cancel. I know, because it happened to me when I had a book launch at 2 Alberta theaters for my best-selling book called The Libranos. It was about Justin Trudeau. It was a mob, including, for example, a disgraceful professor at the University of Alberta. This mob threatened the theater owner until he caved in and banned the book launch. Example 7. By the way, there were 23 other books written about Justin Trudeau at the same time as my book, The Libranos, but mine was obviously the most critical. And so for 4 years now, I have been investigated and prosecuted by Elections Canada, a government agency. They have fined me thousands of dollars. Here's one of their senior police telling me that I had to register my book with the government.
The knowledge that you would have or not have of the Election Act, the Canada Elections Act, when you are planning the book and the new third-party rules, because I believe there's some comments on your site as well about that, did you give any consideration of saying, maybe I should register as a third party for this circumstance, or maybe I shouldn't because of my interpretation of what I'm going to do, or did you not make that determination?
Tim, I appreciate the question. Yeah, I absolutely did think about that at great length.
Do you want to share any of those thoughts?
Well, sure, some of them. I mean, I thought the day I register with the government to write a book is the day we no longer are the True North strong and free. And if Elections Canada's commissioners are stupid enough to prosecute me for writing, publishing, and promoting a book about an election during an election, then that's an important fight to have, because we need to roll back these pencil-neck bureaucrats and their blackface boss, and we need to remind them that we're still a free country.
Boy, they hate that book. Example number 8. So the government prosecuted me for the book. A mob terrorized a theater owner into canceling my book launch, and the country's largest book chain, Chapters Indigo, refuses to stock my book. They never carry conservative books, and if they do, staff routinely hide them. Try to find Tamara Leach's best-selling book about the convoy, or Andrew Lawton's. A government-created book monopoly censors conservative books. That's censorship. Example 9. Oh, well, just sell your books on Amazon, right? Okay, good idea. Until they ban you. We published a best-selling book called China Virus, critical of Trudeau and his connections to China during the pandemic, and Amazon banned it. Then they unbanned it for a couple of days, and then they rebanned it. We asked why, and all they would tell us is that officials told them to ban it. Chinese officials or Canadian officials? And which answer would be worse? Example 10. Rebel News and other independent media are banned from attending the federal government's press conferences in Parliament. Even worse, this is enforced by our subsidized media competitors at the Parliamentary Press Gallery, every one of whom takes money from Justin Trudeau. We are literally banned because of our viewpoint. Example 11, we haven't just been banned by the government in Canada, we've been banned by the Canadian government of the United Nations. We used to be accredited there until a Trudeau cabinet minister told them to refuse us. That's censorship. Example 12, twice now, Rebel News was personally, our company was specifically banned from covering the national election debates organized by the government. Twice we had to go to the federal court and have them struck down and ordered to accredit us. Why do we have to go to court to even attend a public debate? Example 13, Rebel journalists have been physically beaten, shoved, and even shot by police, including by Justin Trudeau's personal bodyguards. Look at Trudeau's bodyguards here jumping out of his SUV and beating up David Menzies, who is simply standing with a microphone to ask him a question.
What are you doing? Get off me! Hey, I can... Hey, this is assault. Move. I'm on a side... What is this? I'm on a sidewalk. I am on a side... What is this? You cannot touch me. No rushing over. Hey! Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Let's go. What is this? You can't. Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest?
Absolutely atrocious, and silence from the media party. Example 14. Calgary police have demanded the right to seize footage, including photographs, video recordings, and audio recordings. They demand to know what we're working on. Example 15. Bill C-11. Look at section 9.11e. It gives Trudeau the power to alter the discoverability algorithm for Facebook, YouTube, and Google. He can push down sites he doesn't like and push up sites he does. Example 16. Trudeau has introduced a journalism license called the QCJO, Qualified Canadian Journalism Organization. You have to apply to the government, and they decide whether or not they can trust your journalism before giving you this license. Rebel News has been refused this license. Bizarrely, the government claims that less than 1% of what we do is journalism. We're going to court, but that's part of the point, isn't it? The process is the punishment. Just to do our job, we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours in court. Example 17, another Trudeau bill called C-18. The idea behind this bill is simple and crass. Trudeau is going to charge Facebook and Google money for every time they link to a news source. They'll collect that money, and Trudeau will apportion it only to trusted media. That's Trudeau's word. Example 18. Government pressure on social media companies. We've learned from Twitter and the Twitter files that the Canadian government, through their state broadcaster, threatened to sue Twitter if Twitter didn't silence the government's opponents. Obviously, they're talking about us too. Example 19. The Canadian government actually spies on us. They hired a contractor at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock to do a information operation workup on Rebel News, treating us as if we're a foreign enemy. Example 20. The state media, Trudeau's CBC state broadcaster, has a permanent campaign to denormalize us. That's not journalism. That's them running an errand for Trudeau to further censor us. Example 21. Being blocked on Twitter by cabinet ministers. I'm not talking about their personal Twitter accounts. I'm talking about government department accounts. Rebel News journalists are blocked from accessing information on Twitter that every other citizen has access to. It's a way of saying if you disagree with the government, you will be cut off from normal goods and services that you are due as a citizen. Example 22. In Canada, no industry is more highly regulated than the big banks. They're practically public utilities. And so it's no surprise that the Royal Bank, a bank with whom I have banked for decades, refused to give Rebel News a mortgage. It's not quite true. We were actually approved for a mortgage. The mortgage officer said we had a great mortgage application, but when the national office got wind of us, they canceled us for political reasons. Here's the local mortgage broker telling me that on the phone.
Yeah, it's just about the nature of the business altogether. Because the bank has been, I'll be blunt with you, the bank has been trying to pry away from certain, clients where they're kind of out there in the media and very strong opinionated, which is your business in a way. So we're just clearing some internal hurdles to make sure that the bank is okay to onboard you as a client internally.
Example 23, this goes to what I was saying about Billboard Chris before. Billboard Chris is a good egg, but I wouldn't want him to wear his billboard within 100 meters of a drag queen story hour, or he'd be arrested and charged like Pastor Derek Reimer. Next example, also from Alberta, Arthur Pavlovsky. He gave a sermon down at the Coutts blockade. It was an 18-minute speech. He went down there, gave them a pep talk, and said, hold the line, but be peaceful. Arthur Pavlovsky was charged with inciting mischief, convicted, and given a 60-day sentence. Example 25. church closures during the lockdown. It's related. When you're not allowed to gather to pray, that is a form of censorship. Costco, cannabis stores, liquor stores, Walmart, they weren't forced to close during the lockdown, but churches were. Example 26, compelled speech. The same Arthur Pawlowski I mentioned a moment ago was actually ordered by a rogue judge that whenever he criticized lockdowns, he was required to immediately thereafter read a little message handwritten by that judge, basically renouncing and denouncing himself. A Christian pastor in church, on Facebook, or in media interviews, whenever he criticized the government, had to immediately add a disclaimer that he was wrong. Example 27. Trudeau has effectively exiled Facebook and Google from the news business. I mentioned before C-18 that would compel those companies to pay for linking to news sources. Obviously, they won't do that, but that has cut off an enormous amount of news to Canadian consumers, leaving the dominant player as the CBC. When Spain tried something similar to Google years ago, Google stopped sharing news, and the big players got more news, and independent startups got cut off. That's Trudeau's plan for Canada. Example 28. Just this past week, the town of Waterloo passed a bylaw saying you're not allowed to have any hateful words, no harassing words that make you feel bad. And that's against the law in Waterloo now. The government saying you're not allowed to make people feel bad. Example number 29, just this last week, a $300 ticket for someone on public transit talking about support for the Million March for Kids, the Parents' Rights, Children's Rights March against transgender extremism in the school. Simply talking about this idea on the public transit yielded a $300 fine. Example 30, and the biggest example of all, Trudeau invoking a form of martial law called the Emergencies Act after a week of peaceful protest by the truckers, and this insane Trudeau cabinet minister claiming that honk honk was actually code for Heil Hitler. Get a load of this kook.
How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler, do we need to see by these protesters on social media?
Yeah, it would be funny if she didn't declare martial law, seize hundreds of bank accounts of peaceful protesters, and throw Tamara Leach, the leader of the protest, in prison for 49 days. Those are 30 examples. I'll give you a 31st as a bonus. Doctors in Canada who dared to speak out against the lockdowns or even the vaccine mandates were suspended and investigated by their colleges of physicians and surgeons. There you have it, 31 examples, some big, some small, some shocking, and some subtle, some I'm sure you've never heard before, 30 ways that Canada is less free when it comes to freedom of speech. How do you feel right now? A little depressed? Well, you should feel upset, you should feel worried, but don't give up hope, because there were some victories in that list, weren't there? For example, I mentioned that twice Rebel News was banned from covering the federal election debates, but twice we ran to the federal court on an emergency basis, and twice the Federal Court of Canada agreed with us that Trudeau was violating our constitutional rights. And twice, the court ordered Trudeau to stop discriminating against us, to allow us to report on the debates, and even to pay us thousands of dollars in legal fees. My point is, don't give up hope. That's what they want you to do. Don't give up your freedoms. Fight back. I said I was going to give you 30 examples of Canadian censorship, and I did. I gave you 31. But I also said I'd give you one way to fight back. And here it is. Go to our website, stopthecensorship.ca. You can do a few things there. First of all, you can learn about all the censorship in Canada. Second of all, you can sign our petition against censorship, and I know Trudeau will ignore it, but let him see that there are hundreds of thousands of Canadians against him. Chip in to our various lawsuits where we fight back. Read about those lawsuits. Right now, if I count correctly, we have 7 lawsuits that we have filed against the government to expand our freedoms, and we'll have another one as soon as tomorrow. Ongoing litigation with the government includes my battle against Elections Canada. They're trying to criminalize my book, The Libranos. That was in court just 2 weeks ago. If we lose, God forbid, we'll appeal. The Twitter ban by Stephen Guilbeault. Our QCJO journalism license being refused by the government, we're appealing that. Physical attacks on our journalists. We're suing Trudeau's bodyguards. Did you know that? We're suing the RCMP, who during the martial law period shot our reporter, Alexa Lavoie. You can learn about these fight backs at stopthecensorship.ca. And just yesterday, I reached out to a law firm to see if there was some way to fight against Justin Trudeau's new compulsion that all live streamers and podcasters have to register with the government. There you have it, the state of Canadian freedom in 2023. I got a question for you. Why doesn't the mainstream media care? There's a lot of answers to that. One is they're on Trudeau's payroll, so they don't have to care, and maybe they never meant it anyways. Maybe the only freedom they cared about was their own. But here at Rebel News, we don't take a dime from any government, certainly not from Justin Trudeau. We survive only because of our viewers. That's how we do our journalism, through crowdfunding. But it's not enough just to tell the story. Every once in a while, we have to stop and get involved and fight back, because if we don't, who will? And if not now, then when? Go to stopthecensorship.ca, read about what's going on in the country, read about what we're doing, sign our petition, and if you can, help chip in to cover our enormous legal fees. No one else is out there fighting for freedom, not in the courts at least. We need your help. Thanks.